Hello aspirants, welcome to daily UPSC Current Affairs Revision Series by Insights IAS. In today's session, we'll cover licensing urban cooperative banks, the Bankers Books Evidence Bill 2026, the Seafarer-First Initiative, the Dr. M.S. Swaminathan Award for Environment Protection 2026, and interstate river water in India. And in mapping, we'll explore the Danube River. So, without any further delay, let's get started. Let's start with a genuinely important banking reform story, one that's been over 2 decades in the making, licensing urban cooperative banks. Here's the context. The Reserve Bank of India governor announced that the central bank will soon issue draft guidelines for the resumption of on-tap licensing of urban cooperative banks. Now, just think about that for a second. On-tap licensing that's been paused for over 20 years is finally about to reopen. So, what exactly does licensing urban cooperative banks mean? It refers to the regulatory authorization granted by the Reserve Bank of India under Section 22, read with Section 56 of the Banking Regulation Act 1949. This license empowers primary cooperative credit societies to conduct banking activities such as accepting public deposits and granting credit in urban and semi-urban areas. Now, let's walk through the regulatory history and timeline because this is genuinely a story with dramatic ups and downs, so let's slow down. In 1966, urban cooperative banks were brought under the RBI's regulatory ambit via amendments to the Banking Regulation Act. Then, between May 1993 and June 2001, there was a liberalized licensing era, where over 820 new UCB licenses were issued, a genuinely rapid expansion. But in 2004, the RBI suspended new urban cooperative bank licenses, following widespread failures among these newly licensed entities, and that suspension lasted over 2 decades. Then, in January 2026, the RBI released a comprehensive discussion paper on reopening UCB licensing. And now, in August 2026, the RBI governor announced upcoming draft guidelines for on-tap licensing based on stakeholder feedback. That's exactly where today's context picks up. Its aim is genuinely community-focused to expand sustainable, relationship-based community banking, foster grassroots financial inclusion in urban and semi-urban regions, and allow well-run cooperative credit societies to transition into full-fledged regulated banks. Now, let's go through the proposed criteria for licensing, and this is genuinely dense with numbers, so let's slow down carefully. On minimum capital, the applicant society must possess a minimum net worth or capital of rupees 300 crore. On operational track record, it must have been actively operating for at least 10 years, showing a strong financial track record for at least 5 years. On capital adequacy ratio, CRAR, there's a minimum capital to risk-weighted assets ratio of 12%. On asset quality, net non-performing assets are capped at not more than 3%. And on geographical footprint, preference is given to multi-state cooperative credit societies due to their broader scale, though select single-state entities meeting the criteria may also be considered. Now, let's understand why licensing was actually halted back in 2004, because this history genuinely explains today's caution. There was widespread insolvency and financial weakness. Nearly 31% of the UCBs licensed during the 1990s liberalization turned financially unsound within a short period, due to poor credit appraisal and rapid, unviable expansion. Hold that 31% figure firmly, it's genuinely striking. Nearly 1 in 3 newly licensed banks failed. There were also major governance failures and frauds, prominent collapses, such as the Madhavpura Mercantile Cooperative Bank crisis in 2001, exposed severe corporate governance deficits, conflict of interest, and insider lending. And there were dual regulation gaps. Banking operations were supervised by the RBI, while administrative and managerial oversight rested with state registrars of cooperative societies, RCS, creating enforcement delays and supervisory loopholes. Essentially, nobody had full control, and that gap is exactly what let problems fester. Now, let's understand why the RBI feels confident enough to restart licensing now. and this is genuinely reassuring. So let's go through each safeguard. There are strengthened statutory powers. The Banking Regulation Amendment Act 2020 granted the RBI direct powers over UCB management, board constitution, and resolution, effectively fixing that dual regulation loophole from 2004. There's a four-tier prudential framework. The implementation of deposit-based tiered regulatory standards, tiers 1 to 4, since December 2022, ensured calibrated risk oversight, meaning smaller and larger UCBs are now regulated proportionate to their size and risk. There are also improved sector balance sheets. Gross NPAs of UCBs fell to a 6-year low of Rs 21,769 crore in financial year 2026, alongside higher provisioning coverage ratios, PCR, and capital buffers, a genuinely healthier sector than the one that collapsed in the early 2000s. And there's institutional backing via NUCFDC, the establishment of the National Urban Cooperative Finance and Development Corporation in 2024, offers shared technology platforms, liquidity support, and capital mobilization for UCBs, essentially giving smaller cooperative banks access to resources they could never build alone. So, to quickly recap for your exam, RBI is set to resume on-tap Urban Cooperative Banks licensing after a 22-year pause since 2004, when nearly 31% of licensed UCBs turned financially unsound. Remember the proposed criteria: Rs 300 crore minimum capital, a 12% CRAR, and net NPAs capped at 3%, and that the 2020 Amendment Act and the 2024 NUCFDC were the key reforms that finally fixed the earlier dual regulation gap. Next, let's move to a genuinely important legal modernization, the Bankers' Books Evidence Bill 2026. Here's the context. The Lok Sabha passed this bill by voice vote amid opposition protests. It was introduced by the Finance Minister on the 3rd of August 2026. And here's a genuinely striking detail worth holding on to right away. This legislation replaces a 135-year-old colonial-era law, the Bankers' Books Evidence Act 1891, to formally align legal evidence standards with modern digital, virtual, and cloud-based banking. Just think about that for a second. A law from 1891, written for a world of paper ledgers, is finally catching up with cloud computing. So, what exactly is this bill? It's an updated legislative framework that regulates how bank records are admitted as valid primary evidence in legal proceedings. And here's the genuinely practical shift. It allows certified physical and electronic extracts of bank records to be presented in court without requiring original ledgers or summoning bank officials as routine witnesses. Its aim is to modernize India's banking evidence laws, incorporate technology-neutral provisions for digital banking records, electronic, virtual, and cloud-based, speed up judicial proceedings in financial disputes, and reduce operational burdens on banking personnel. Now, let's go through the key features of this bill. There's an expanded definition of bankers' books, broadening the legal definition beyond just paper ledgers to cover all record formats, including electronic, digital, virtual, and cloud-based databases. There are admissibility and integrity conditions for electronic records, specifying that electronic records are legally enforceable, provided they satisfy 3 integrity criteria: being a true representation of data, showing no unauthorized data changes, and reflecting no system tampering. Hold those 3 conditions firmly. They're exactly the kind of checklist UPSC likes testing. There's standardized digital certification, mandating that electronic records submitted to courts must be accompanied by a technical certificate detailing the generating computer system, authenticated by manual or digital signatures of designated branch or office heads. There's also protection against compulsory court attendance, retaining, and refining provisions, ensuring bank officers cannot be compelled to produce original books or appear as witnesses in cases where the bank is not a party unless ordered by a judge under a strictly defined special cause. And there's power to extend coverage across financial entities. empowering the central government to extend the Act's provisions to other financial sector institutions and entities via official notification. On significance, this bill replaces the 1891 paper-based law with a technology-neutral framework covering core banking solutions, CBS, fintech, and cloud records. And it simplifies evidence verification in banking and fraud cases, speeding up dispute resolution and prosecution. So, to quickly recap for your exam, the Bankers' Books Evidence Bill 2026, introduced on the 3rd of August 2026, replaces the 135-year-old 1891 Act with a technology-neutral evidence framework. Remember the 3 integrity conditions for electronic records: true representation, no unauthorized changes, and no system tampering, and that bank officers still cannot be compelled to testify unless a judge orders it for special cause. Now, let's move to a genuinely urgent maritime security initiative, the Seafarer-First Initiative. The context is that the Union Minister of Ports, Shipping and Waterways launched this whole-of-government response following attacks on 2 merchant vessels, MT Al-Bahia and MT Mombasa, carrying Indian crew members in the Strait of Hormuz. So, what exactly is this initiative? It's an emergency, whole-of-government contingency mechanism launched by India to safeguard, track, and support all Indian seafarers operating in high-risk, conflict-affected maritime zones across West Asia, including the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, and the Gulf of Oman. And here's a genuinely important detail. This protection applies regardless of the flag state of their vessels, meaning it doesn't matter which country's flag the ship sails under. If there's an Indian seafarer aboard, they're covered. It's led by the Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Waterways, and its aim is genuinely comprehensive: to individually account for every Indian seafarer in conflict zones, protect their legal and contractual rights, provide 24/7 emergency and medical support, and ensure that no seafarer is forced to sail into high-risk areas without informed consent and protection. Now, let's go through the key features of this initiative. There's a flag-neutral operational dashboard mandating the Directorate General of Shipping to maintain a live vessel-by-vessel tracking system, monitoring location, crew status, cargo, and risk levels for every Indian seafarer, irrespective of ship flags. There are dedicated liaison officers, appointing a dedicated officer for every affected seafarer to serve as a single point of contact for families, coordinating medical care, repatriation, legal claims, wage settlements, and seafarers' welfare fund assistance, a genuinely reassuring personalized support structure for anxious families back home. There's a 24/7 multi-channel support system, activating round-the-clock emergency assistance lines via domestic toll-free, international helpline, WhatsApp, and email. There's strict employer and RPSL compliance, directing shipowners and recruitment and placement service license agencies to ensure no Indian seafarer is compelled to sail through high-risk zones against their will. And there are fresh threat-based voyage approvals requiring vessel movements through affected West Asian waters to undergo pre-voyage threat assessments, master's professional evaluation, and close coordination with naval or coastal authorities. On significance, this initiative recognizes seafarers as key workers, ensuring legal, humanitarian, and financial protection during crises. And it reinforces international maritime law, safeguarding vital shipping routes like the Strait of Hormuz for global energy trade. So, to quickly recap for your exam, the Seafarer-First Initiative, led by Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Waterways, protects Indian seafarers in West Asian conflict zones regardless of their vessel's flag state, following attacks on MT Al-Bahia and MT Mombasa. Remember the flag-neutral Directorate General of Shipping Tracking Dashboard, dedicated liaison officers for every affected seafarer, and mandatory pre-voyage threat assessments before entering high-risk waters. Now, let's move to a genuinely heartwarming recognition of grassroots environmental heroes, the Dr. M.S. Swaminathan Award for Environment Protection 2026. The context is that 2 grassroots women changemakers, P. Pechiyammal and Govindammal were honored with this award at an event in Chennai. So, what exactly is this award? It's a national recognition awarded to grassroots individuals, community champions, or organizations for outstanding contributions to environmental preservation, coastal plastic cleanup, biodiversity protection, and sustainable agriculture. It's instituted and supported by the MS Swaminathan Research Foundation in partnership with Care Private Limited and the Rotary Club of Madras East, RI District 3234, a genuinely nice blend of scientific, corporate, and community organizations coming together. Its aim is to recognize, honor, and encourage grassroots leaders working tirelessly to preserve natural ecosystems, clean up marine pollution, promote climate-resilient farming, and strike a balance between developmental growth and ecological conservation. Now, let's understand who's eligible for this award. It's open to grassroots champions and organizations, including individuals, local community workers, smallholder farmers, fisherfolk, and non-governmental entities operating across India. And candidates must demonstrate impactful environmental contribution, showing tangible, measurable improvements in areas such as marine waste management, sustainable farming, seed preservation, or biodiversity restoration. Now, let's go through the key features of this award. It has a focus on unsung community leaders, recognizing grassroots conservation champions, such as small farmers and fisherwomen, whose local actions protect ecosystems despite climate and livelihood challenges. It has a dual scope, covering both terrestrial and marine protection, marine conservation, such as ghost net removal and beach cleanups, and sustainable land practices, like water-efficient farming and FPO-led agriculture. There's multi-stakeholder collaboration too, bringing together scientific expertise from MS Swaminathan Research Foundation, corporate CSR support from Care, and community outreach from the Rotary Club to strengthen conservation efforts. There's promotion of the Evergreen Revolution, rewarding initiatives that reflect Dr. MS Swaminathan's vision of increasing agricultural productivity while conserving natural resources and biodiversity. And there's community-centric inclusion, encouraging marginalized rural communities to form collectives, such as farmer-producer organizations, FPOs, improving livelihoods while promoting sustainable resource management. Now, let's look at what these two remarkable women actually achieved. P. Pechiyammal from Ramanathapuram, Tamil Nadu, worked in marine conservation and ocean plastic management, leading community efforts to remove abandoned fishing nets from coastal waters and shorelines, and helping protect coral reefs, turtles, and fish by reducing ghost net entanglement. Govindammal from Villupuram, Tamil Nadu, worked in sustainable and climate-resilient agriculture, promoting organic farming, soil health, and climate-resilient agricultural practices, while strengthening farmer-producer companies to improve farmers' bargaining power. So, to quickly recap for your exam, the Dr. MS Swaminathan Award for Environment Protection 2026 was jointly instituted by MS Swaminathan Research Foundation, Care, and the Rotary Club of Madras East. Remember P. Pechiyammal work removing ghost nets to protect coral reefs and turtles in Ramanathapuram, and Govindammal work promoting organic farming and strengthening farmer-producer companies in Villupuram. Now, let's move to a genuinely important constitutional and federal topic, interstate river water in India. The context is that during the presentation of Tamil Nadu state budget, Finance Minister N. Murray Wilson asserted that the state government would safeguard its rightful share of interstate river waters. So, what exactly is interstate river water? It refers to water resources from rivers, streams, and river valleys that flow through or form boundaries between two or more states within a nation. And here's the core challenge worth understanding. Because river basins do not conform to state political boundaries, the allocation, management, and sharing of these waters frequently require interstate coordination and federal adjudication mechanisms. Now, let's understand the constitutional provisions associated with this, because these are genuinely foundational and frequently tested. Under Article 262, Adjudication of Disputes, Article 262 Clause 1 empowers Parliament to enact laws for the adjudication of any dispute or complaint regarding the use, distribution, or control of the waters of or in any interstate river or river valley. And Article 262 Clause 2 allows Parliament to exclude the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court or any other court over such disputes or complaints, a genuinely unusual constitutional carve-out worth remembering. Now, on the 7th schedule allocation, this is exactly where UPSC could build a tricky question, so pay close attention. Entry 17 in the state list, List 2, deals with water supplies, irrigation, canals, drainage, embankments, water storage, and water power. But this is explicitly subject to Entry 56 of the Union List. And Entry 56 in the Union List, List 1, empowers the central government to regulate and develop interstate rivers and river valleys to the extent declared by Parliament by law in the public interest. Notice that relationship water is primarily a state subject, but the moment a river crosses state boundaries and Parliament declares it in the public interest, the centre steps in. Now let's go through the key laws associated with this framework, and this is genuinely dense, so let's slow down. There's the Interstate River Water Disputes Act 1956, enacted under Article 262 of the Constitution to establish a framework for resolving water dispute complaints between states. On tribunal constitution, if negotiations between states fail, the central government constitutes an ad hoc interstate water dispute tribunal to adjudicate the issue. On binding awards, the decision or award rendered by the tribunal carries the force of a decree of the Supreme Court and is final and binding on the contesting states. And on exclusion of court jurisdiction, courts, including the Supreme Court, cannot entertain appeals against tribunal awards under standard statutory jurisdiction. That's exactly Article 262 Clause 2 being operationalized through this Act. There's also the River Boards Act 1956, enacted under Entry 56 of the Union List to enable the regulation and development of interstate rivers and river valleys. On establishment of boards, it authorizes the central government to set up river boards upon request from state governments or on its own initiative. And on advisory role, these boards are designed to advise states on integrated river basin management, flood control, soil conservation, and irrigation development. Notice that these boards are advisory in nature, not adjudicatory like the tribunals under the Interstate River Water Disputes Act. So, to quickly recap for your exam, interstate river water disputes are adjudicated under Article 262 with water sitting under Entry 17 of the state list, subject to Entry 56 of the Union List. Remember, the Interstate River Water Disputes Act 1956 creates binding tribunals whose awards carry the force of a Supreme Court decree and cannot be appealed, while the River Boards Act 1956 sets up purely advisory bodies for river basin management. Finally, let's turn to today's mapping topic, and this one's tied to a genuinely concerning climate story from Europe, the Danube River. The context is that water levels in Europe's Danube River dropped to record low levels across several countries, including Hungary, Slovakia, Romania, and Bulgaria, due to severe, prolonged summer heat waves and drought across the continent. So, what exactly is the Danube? It's Europe's second longest river after Russia's Volga River and one of the world's most international river basins. Stretching approximately 2,850 kilometers or 1,770 miles, it serves as a critical economic artery, freshwater source, natural boundary, and ecological corridor linking Central and Southeastern Europe to the Black Sea. On its location and origin, it rises in the Black Forest Mountains of Western Germany at the confluence of two small mountain streams, the Breg and the Brigach, and it drains into the Black Sea via the UNESCO-protected Danube Delta in Romania and Ukraine. Now, here's a genuinely important list worth remembering: the nations it flows through. The main river course flows through or forms the borders of 10 European nations: Germany, Austria, Slovakia, Hungary, Croatia, Serbia, Bulgaria, Romania, Moldova, and Ukraine. That's exactly the kind of how many countries fact that UPSC loves testing. Now, let's go through its key features. There are three geographical sections: the Upper Danube, mountainous, fast-flowing alpine course; the Middle Danube, a flatland course, traversing the Hungarian plains and the scenic Iron Gate Gorge; and the Lower Danube, a broad, marshy plain leading to the Black Sea. There's a dense tributary network too, supported by more than 300 tributaries, over 30 of which are navigable, including major rivers like the Inn, Drava, Sava, Tisa, Prut, and Siret. Now, here's a genuinely unique fact worth holding on to firmly. It connects 4 European capitals. The Danube is unique in flowing directly through or bounding 4 national capital cities: Vienna in Austria, Bratislava in Slovakia, Budapest in Hungary, and Belgrade in Serbia. That's genuinely a rare distinction for any single river anywhere in the world. There's also a vast biosphere delta. The Danube Delta covers approximately 4,300 square kilometers across Romania and Ukraine, forming one of Europe's largest wetland ecosystems and a vital habitat for migratory birds and aquatic species. And there are key engineering structures featuring major navigation channels, reservoirs, and hydroelectric projects. Most notably, the Iron Gate 1 and 2 dams between Serbia and Romania, and the Gabčíkovo Dam in Slovakia. So, to quickly recap for your exam, the Danube, Europe's second longest river at 2,850 kilometers, rises in Germany's Black Forest and flows through 10 countries before reaching the Black Sea via Romania and Ukraine's Danube Delta. Remember, it's the only river to flow through 4 national capitals: Vienna, Bratislava, Budapest, and Belgrade, and its key hydroelectric structures, the Iron Gate 1 and 2 dams, and the Gabčíkovo Dam. And that brings us to the end of today's Prelims in Focus. In today's session, we covered licensing of urban cooperative banks from GS Paper 3, Indian Economy, the Banker's Books Evidence Bill, 2026, from GS Paper 2, Polity and Governance, the Seafarer-First Initiative from GS Paper 3, Security and Maritime Affairs, the Dr. M.S. Swaminathan Award for Environment Protection 2026 from GS Paper 3, Environment, Interstate River Water in India from GS Paper 2, Polity and Federalism, and the Danube River Under Mapping. For the complete current affairs article and today's practice MCQs, visit insightsonindia.com using the link given in the description. Also, subscribe to the Insights IAS YouTube channel and join our official Telegram group for regular UPSC-related updates and learning resources. Thank you for joining us today, and we will see you again in the next session.